Hey y'all, hey, it's me, Giovanni, aka the Lux Libra, and we are back live with another episode of Chat with the AunTeas. This week, we are going to talk about overwhelm. How do you get out of overwhelm? And if you've ever faced overwhelm. We're going to get started. I am not sipping on tea today. Why am I not sipping on tea? Well, one reason is because I am in the process of transitioning to a new space. So if you notice, my background looks a little bit different today. And one of the things that I need in my space is an electric tea kettle, and haven't gotten that yet. But I do have my tea, I do have my honey, and so we're just bringing it all in. But in the meantime, I am sipping on some high quality H2O out of my Raise Your Vibrations glass from the lovely Jill over at Goddess Provisions. So shout out to Jill. Shout out to High Quality H2O. And shout out to you for joining us again this week for Chat with the AunTeas. Malaika, how are you?
I'm good. Clearly, I am doing the most with this camera because I just need to buy a whole new rig for the car. Um, so yes, speaking of overwhelm, that is exactly where I find myself today. So y'all just bear with your Tia Malika. I'm still a hope dealer. I'm still out here pushing positivity constantly. One thing that I encountered last week that I have definitely a theme that I have been sitting with and working on is the idea of toxic positivity, this need to push positivity at all costs. So I say this all the time. I'm always very clear about this point. I am not going to tell you that everything is okay. I am not going to make it look like everything is always okay and I'm just having all of these, spectacular Instagram post worthy days. Some days are not great. I have no tea today. I've been drinking water all day. Avion, it tastes like rain and snowflakes. I know because I've tasted rain before. Like this is where I'm at. It does not always look pretty. And I am positive that whatever I am supposed to learn in this moment is what all of this is for, and that I am okay with not being okay, and that's what positivity looks like to me. So that's what I'm bringing y'all today. That's what I wanted to clarify that point. That pushing positivity constantly isn't about telling you that you have to be okay when you're not okay. It's not about telling you that it has to um, look a certain way. It is what it is when you are where you are. So I
I
don't
hear
know what
you.
happened. Okay, there we go. I'm like, I can't hear you again.
No, I hear you, and I definitely agree with that. We can't be positive all the time. We aren't positive all the time. And I'm going to read a little excerpt from a place that I always go to when I do feel overwhelmed, and it's from one of my favorite books, Asking It Is Given by Abraham Hicks. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Hicks's work, Abraham was a spirit that was channeled through Esther Hicks, and Esther and her husband Jerry would travel around the country sharing the channeled messages from Abraham. So, the piece that I want to share around that is a piece that I always go back to, and it's from their, like I said, it's from their book. And the section is titled, If I Can Get There Emotionally, I Can Get Anywhere. And it says, right now I'm going to find the best feeling thought that I can. I'm going to reach for more relief, and more relief. Remember, rage gives you a feeling of relief from depression, grief, despair, fear, guilt, or powerlessness. Um, Revenge gives you a feeling of relief from rage. Anger gives you a feeling of relief from revenge. Blame gives you a feeling of relief from anger. Overwhelmment gives you a feeling of relief from blame. Irritation gives you a feeling of relief from overwhelmment. Pessimism gives you a feeling of relief from irritation. Hopefulness gives you a feeling of relief from pessimism. Optimism gives you a feeling of relief from hopefulness. Positive expectation gives you a feeling of relief from optimism. And joy gives you a feeling of relief from positive expectation. So I just always feel that's right on time. Like we can't jump straight to positive. It's levels to this.
Man,
And and so we have to go through those levels to get to where we need to get to. And it's absolutely okay that we don't snap and magically have a new mood. It's okay to go, as they said, from rage to revenge, from revenge to anger, and through those emotions. And overwhelm is somewhere in the middle, right? Overwhelm is a little bit higher vibration than blame, but it's a little bit lower vibration than irritation. So it's a process. So it's not just absolute. And so I think we have to remember that and give ourselves the grace to make it through those levels to the level that we want to be at. So I'm right there with you. We don't just go straight to positive.
right. And the other part of that in this feeling of overwhelm is that doing the work is a process, right? You don't just wake up one day healed. Like you're doing this on a consistent basis. And I may heal on one level from something today and encounter it down the road a ways. And, I'm encountering it in a different way. I'm encountering it from a different space and with different energy, but it may require different tools. It may not present the same way. I may not be able to solve it the same way. So it's this ongoing thing where it's not like, oh, I woke up today and everything is great and everything is fixed. And then, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and everything's still going to be great and still be fixed. I may be in a different space tomorrow. I may be encountering it in a different way tomorrow. Like, we don't, this whole, being positive thing sometimes skips all of those gradients. And it's like, well, no, like you're okay. Like that thing happened and it was fixed and you're okay. So you're just supposed to be okay, period. And that's not what it always looks like.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that. And that's unrealistic and dangerous for us to think it does. And we live in a world where we are constantly bombarded with social media posts, with regular media, traditional media, TV, radio, film, and just spaces. We have so much access into other people's lives that will give us a very specific impression. But then we also have to remember that access is very much controlled access. We don't have
Right.
full access to their lives. We don't know everything that's going on. We don't know everything behind the scenes. And we always appreciate transparency. And I think we try to be really transparent in our expressions. But the reality is that even what we're seeing online, even what we're seeing on television, is largely curated, it's largely manufactured, it's largely created with a strategy or with an intention. So it may not be what we think it is. It's not necessarily what we're
Right.
seeing. So we have to be conscientious of that and cognizant of that when we are dealing with ourselves, so that we are giving ourselves what we need to heal. That it is a process, that it is a space that we take up, and that we take that space up over time. It's not just instant, absolute. And my dad loves to say we live in a microwave society. We expect things to be done quickly just because we can do some things quickly, but
Right.
everything can't happen quickly like that. Everything isn't overnight.
Yeah, everything can't happen quickly and shouldn't happen quickly, right? Like some things require a process. And when we're given some of these quick fixes, it's not until later that we found out that maybe the quick way wasn't the best way. I remember being really excited about microwaves. Like, I remember being really excited when we got our first microwave. Like, yes, we can get some stuff popping real quick. I don't have to wait. I'm from one of those families where we cooked. Like, we cooked everything. There wasn't really any quick meals. My dad didn't allow us to eat a lot of processed foods. So we didn't have snacks and chips and whatever. Like if you were hungry, you had to decide how hungry you were. You were either piece of fruit hungry or you were going to have to get in the kitchen and do something hungry. Like those were your choices. There was no, Like, oh, I'm gonna just go grab a snack pack, from the bag of chips, or I'm gonna go. No, mm-mm. Like, even if you wanted potato chips, like, you were gonna have to cut potatoes and fry potatoes. Like, it wasn't just no. There was no like quick way of doing stuff. I appreciate that now. Especially having a family and like meal planning and not keeping a lot of convenience foods around, um, for our health benefits. It definitely helps me with my PCOS because when those hormones are out of control, a lot of times I do want to just eat what's convenient and taste good, but then I have the flip side of that is how's it going to affect my body? Am I going to have a reaction? So I'm glad that those parameters were set up for me. Um, but I was excited. I was excited about a microwave. I'm not gonna lie. I was excited about the quickness of being able to have things. I didn't have to put stuff in a pot to reheat it. I could just pop it in the microwave, and 60 seconds later, I could be eating spaghetti and happy, and not waiting for it to reheat in the pot. But then, after we did that for a while, we were super excited about microwaves. They said microwaves can cause cancer. So then our microwave went away. Then we didn't have no microwave because the microwave had to go out of the house because the microwave has microwaves and it's radioactive and we're going to get cancer. And so now you got to go back to warming your food up in the pot. And I was mad to the motherfucker. I was like, you going to give us this greatness, this magic of quick food, and then take it away to tell me I have to go back to reheating stuff up in the pot? How could you? And I say all of that to say that sometimes we find out later on that the quick way of doing things is not necessarily the best way for us to do them. So I have, as an adult, lived in both a house with microwaves and a house without microwaves. Uh, Wilhelmina is upset because we are once again microwaveless. When me and Sam got together, Sam had a microwave. And my children went through that excitement of, yes, we've got a microwave and we can warm things up in 2 minutes. And then we got a toaster oven and the microwave went away. And it was like, man, we got to wait 25 minutes to warm up one beef patty. Like, we used to be able to do that in 2.5 minutes tops. But it's not healthy for us. And they realize, like, at the end of the day, as much as we don't like this convenience, we realize that mom's trying to keep us healthy. And so, that is the analogy. Like, that's life. Everything that we're told to do quickly. We started having these conversations based on self-care and self-esteem and the wrong information or incomplete information that's been given to us. We started these conversations because we were having conversations about how we realized, there was so much more to self-care than Jesus and bubble baths and getting our nails done. Like, that's maintenance. Like, there are levels to the type of care that we need for ourselves in order to be whole and in order to be healed. And that is not a quick process. It is not as simple as polishing my nails and getting a pedicure and all of a sudden being over my anxiety. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's all a process, right? And I love nature. Nature is always my inspiration, my teacher. I spend time intentionally outside every day for health reasons, for mental health reasons, and physical health reasons. I'll say that because it really does help my mental health and my physical health. And just watching how that happens, how that operates, and learning and knowing, getting a sense of timing from nature, from observing nature and the processes that come with that. Even knowing, being able to look outside and knowing I have this much time to get out there if I want to get actual sunlight. And I'll have this much time if I'm just out there while it's dusk, but it's still, some light out. And I know if I go right at dusk and I sit quietly and still long enough, the rabbits will come out and I'll get to see the rabbits. So I'm learning, very carefully how nature and how the environment responds. And I think the thing that we forget is we're part of nature too. And no matter how many conveniences we build for ourselves, no matter how creative we are, we can never fully detach ourselves from nature. We are still creatures of this earth and from this earth, even as much as we try to dominate it and control it and be in control of it, we're still of the earth. And we still have to go through processes that the earth requires us to go through because our bodies are still in alignment with the earth. No matter where our minds are, our minds can be in alignment with technology, whatever kind of stimulus we get it, because our minds are very malleable. But our bodies are in alignment with earth, and it takes time for those feelings to pass through our bodies because those feelings are chemicals. They're chemicals that our body produces, and our body produces those chemicals in response to certain stimuli. And if we're overstimulated, it can get us into overwhelm. And our bodies have to process that overwhelm. The situation can be over, but the lingering chemicals, the lingering feelings, the lingering emotions, the lingering thoughts don't just go away because the situation is over. And we have to respect that. That's part of respecting where we come from. That's part of respecting our nature as human beings. So I'm glad that you're talking about that, and I just see how easily it ties to the realities that we live in, to our lived experiences and our lived realities. That we're nature, we're natural, we're animals, and we have to process and live in nature in that way. So the best thing for us to do is to recognize the overwhelm and see how we need to walk through that overwhelm. So for me, one of my primary ways of walking through is remembering that list of emotions. Remembering that, okay, I could get into irritated. Can I just be irritated? Am I okay with just being real irritated about it instead of overwhelmed by it? Well, maybe if I make a list, and maybe if I talk to somebody about the first three things on the list, then I can just be irritated by the rest of the list because I will have processed some of the overwhelm. Or maybe I need to do just some real quiet alone time and sitting and meditating about it. Or maybe this is a case where I need to move this energy. So maybe I need to do some yoga. Maybe I need to do something at the opposite end of strenuous level and do some kickboxing or Taibo or something like that to really process those emotions and get those feelings out. But we have to know what works for us, and we have to know
Yes,
how we can get from one level to the next.
yes, totally agree. Resonating with all of that, like because it's so easy to go to extremes, right? It's so easy to say, I need to move this energy and let me do something that's high energy, um, that is strenuous, so that I feel something in my body, or let me just check out. And like I have definitely done done both of those things. It's either been let me go work out until I can't walk tomorrow, or because I have control over that, right? Like I have control over my body, and this helps me to get back centered. And I had to realize that, like I had to realize how I was functioning, um, because people would say, "Oh, work out," and they don't understand that working out may not necessarily be the best solution for you. Like you've got to figure that out, like what level of work, or pillow
Right.
fort. Like I'm gonna just check out. Like I'm gonna be over here in my pillow fort, and I'll see you when I see you. And so now it's, part of doing this work is realizing what those things are, what healthy behaviors look like for me. And it may not look the same way that it does for somebody else. One, it may not look the same way this time as it did last time. So always being able to go back and do those inventories is important. Um, so I definitely want you to put a link for what you read up for us today, because I need that for myself. So I'm asking for what I need. Maybe we can find an online resource or a copy of it. I'm sure there's a PDF floating around somewhere. Uh, Again, the tools that we can use to help us to do these inventories, to figure things out, um, to do our work.
Yeah, and we have so many of them. And I think it is just a matter of knowing which ones to go through. And I like what you said about, working out until you can't walk the next day, and we have to know what works for us and what we need in that moment. Like what's the prescription, right? We have to learn to be our own doctors, right? Healer, heal thyself.
Yeah.
So knowing that, what, this calls for some restorative yoga, or this calls for me being out in nature and taking a walk around the block in my neighborhood and just getting my blood pumping and my body, warmed up and moving some of this energy. Or this requires me to lay down on the grass and let the earth absorb all this mess and, give it back. Just give it back totally. Or this requires me to sit and meditate in the sunshine so that I can feel myself and feel, reconnected. So yeah, like knowing what prescription is right for us at what time. And that's one thing that I love about the healing and wellness movement that's happening right now, especially in a lot of online spaces that we share in. We can know, like, what, I need to take my rose quartz with me today because I really just need
Yeah.
to bring in this energy of self love and forgiveness and kindness towards myself. Because right now, I'm not feeling real nice towards myself or towards others, or, I just need to clear all this stuff out. So I'm just going to take my good big quartz,
Right.
or, just whatever. So, like, learning how to use nature again, crystals are a part of nature. They hold energy from the earth. So, knowing how to use nature, knowing how to use our skills, but also knowing how to name, right? Knowing to name irritation versus overwhelm versus blame, right? And knowing how to name exactly where we are so we can see what's the next level up or down that I would like to get to, or that I can
Right.
test myself. Am I okay with being irritated? No, I'm still pissed as hell. I'm still up in
Right.
in revenge.
Right.
But seeing where we are open to those things. So yeah, like, that's so important. So using our words, learning how to actually name our emotions. And it's so funny to me because I think the first thing kids learn is mad. They learn happy, sad, and mad. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I remember my little niece would just fold her arms and announce, I'm mad. And she would just make these announcements. And we would say, well, why are you mad? And so we would have to walk her through these emotions. But she would just, stomp her feet and fold her arms and announce, I'm mad. So, like, we have to be able to do that. We have to imitate that 4-year old and be able to name our feelings. But fortunately for us, we have a much broader vocabulary. So we can say, I'm irritated. I am angry. I feel vengeful. I feel frustrated. We can go through somewhere on that scale and pick an emotion name. And then we can then say, and I would rather feel irritated. I don't want to be overwhelmed. I just want to be irritated and work towards irritation and releasing some of the overwhelm, but also knowing how to take care of ourselves. I think about one of the great phrases we use in recovery is halt, right? Are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? That's the first check in that you do. And if you're any of those things, you know how to fulfill those, right? If you're hungry, you need to eat and drink some water. If you're lonely, you may need to make a call to a friend or to a caring person who can hear you and hold space for you. If you're tired, you need to lay down and take a nap. You need to turn it off and start over again later. If you're angry, you need to try to get to a higher or lower emotion. So, like, doing those basic check-ins, and so being able to name the emotion, being able to do halt, and then being able to say, what's my prescription for this? Do I need something physical to hold, like my crystal? Do I need some physical movement, like, on one end yoga, on the other end, kickboxing? Do I need to spend time in nature? Is that me walking through a quiet forest, or is that me sitting by a lake with the ducks? And, or is that me just laying in the grass or sitting in the sun? Um, and do I need to talk to a professional? Sometimes we may be at a space where that's the only and best solution. Like, nope, I need to talk to a professional. What do we need to do regarding those around us? Do we need to step away and be alone, or do we need to step out and be in public? And it may be that we don't need to be with a group of friends, but we just may need to be in a public space like the mall or Target, or a coffee shop. We may just need to be out amongst people, or we may need to do something for someone. I think in a culture where we now can have anything on demand and instantly, I think we forget how important service is for someone. And so sometimes we may need to do service for someone. We may need to go somewhere and volunteer. We may need to call an elder and check in on them. We may need to find a younger person that, needs help. We may need to do service for someone just to restore our own feeling of, yes, I have something to contribute. I am, valuable in the world. But it's learning what your prescriptions are and what your prescription is for the particular case you're at right now. Like, what is your emotional state, and what prescription do you need for that emotional state? I think that's the biggest piece. And I think we're not really taught about that. I don't think there's anywhere that I can recall being taught about any of that outside of my own studies of, healing, that I've taken on independently.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that I was taught directly either. Like, I feel like this is one of those things that maybe I saw, and I would really have to sit with that and think about it because nothing immediately comes to my mind. This has definitely been a part of the process. And, for me, I've gone through all of these different modalities with counseling and therapy and, even a little bit with recovery, which is a process I'm still working through because of what my experience has been. So it's been a little from column A and a little from column 2, you know? But you figure it out. You collect these things, and I used to think that I had to use all of the things that I had at my disposal, right? So, I've learned this from over here, and they gave me a list. So I have to be using that list, and I have to be using this list that I learned from over here, and I have to be using this tactic. And so the other part of this is sometimes the overwhelm comes from feeling like you have so many things and not being able to make a decision. So part of it is also really figuring out what works for you. Like, you don't have to do everything, and you don't have to do everything. Certain things have a process that works a certain way, right? If you're in recovery, there are steps, and there is a methodology to those steps that has worked. That is probably not the best place for you to try to a la carte it, right? Like, you need to go through the steps because they're prescribed a certain way. But maybe that is not a thing that works for you. Maybe there's another, thing that works for you. But all of these things are out here for us to figure that out. So it's not, there's one way is the right way. That's what I'm saying. It's, there's this smorgasbord of wellness and care that we can choose from what works for us.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because the thing that I immediately thought about, after you said, there are steps and there are ways, I think that for many of us, and I also think this is heavily reflected in our culture, for many of us, we are not taught the right way.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily witness the best or healthiest ways. And there's never any intervention to say, no, that's not the healthiest way.
Yeah.
It's been made perfectly acceptable and now even encouraged for people to act out in the worst ways.
Yeah.
If we think about, I'm old enough to remember the boom of reality television,
Oh
and
yeah.
the whole idea behind reality television was this is not how you're supposed to act. It was like, when I think back to the real world, it was like, oh, this is when people
Girl,
stop being nice
my,
and start
and
being
you're
real.
being real.
So
As
it's
soon as you
amazing.
said reality TV, I'm like, but we are from the first generation of people that had reality TV. And it
Right.
looks completely different from what it looks like now, right? Like your
Right.
goal now is to get on there and act a fool, to be in the Bad Girls Club. But when we started watching it, it was the real world. And that was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. These kids, are out here barely having jobs, barely making it, hustling. And, if dishes don't get done, that can be a real conversation. And in a real household with 7 different personalities, that's what would happen. But it's now gotten to the point where everything is so exaggerated that people have now taken those exaggerated behaviors and applied them to real life,
Yeah,
right?
they've tried to normalize them. And I remember, years ago when my son went to visit one of his friends, and he came back home and he was like, "Mom, is blah 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 reality show for kids?" And I said, "No, it's none of the reality shows are for kids." And he said, "Yeah, I didn't think so because when I went over so and so's house, they were watching blah 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 reality show." And I was like, "I don't think this is for kids." And I said, "Yeah, it's not for kids." Like, it's the worst possible example for children ever. But there are adults who allow, and even with their children, will watch these shows, but they're watching it to consume it. They're not watching it to say, this is the worst possible example ever. So don't
Right,
do these things, do the exact opposite of these things. They're watching it and they got the popcorn and the wine flowing like everything's A-OK.
right.
And
That's
so
the
we
same thing.
literally have little girls believing, young people believing that it's okay to throw a drink in someone's face or to slap them and call them the B word or to take your anger and frustration out by destroying somebody else's property or, kicking a hole in somebody's wall or any of those kind of crazy things that you witness on reality television. Those things are now normalized, heavily normalized as acceptable parts of behavior. And so not only are people getting in their homes a horrible example of how to respond to stresses and negative emotions, they're also getting it condoned and sensationalized and paid for by major corporations that encourage this behavior through their advertising dollars on these channels and through their sponsorship of these shows. And we also know it's disproportionately targeted towards specific audiences. It's disproportionately women, and it's heavily skewed towards women of color, as they've gotten into this industry. And it's really scary to think that a whole demographic of people are consuming this and then replicating that behavior out in the world. Like, they don't even recognize that there is a screen between themselves and these people. They're looking at it so they can grab it and run with it and take it out in the real world.
Yeah. And so, as we're closing in on our hour, I definitely think that that is a good place to kind of bring the conversation, back around to, what this process looks like and all of the things that we have to consider. So, if we're getting healthy, if our health is focused on what we're doing physically, then we say, oh, I need to give my body XYZ. I need to take in more exercise, or I need to, drink more water, or I need to eat or not eat certain foods. And the same thing goes for all of those other areas, right, on our wellness wheel. As I am healing, I have to be conscious about what I consume, about what I'm listening to, about my social environment, that service piece, my like actual environmental wellness. Is my environment conducive? Do I have, for me, that's having plants around, that's having, light. I've been using one of those color changing light bulbs, like for light therapy. we have to consider all of these different things, and we weren't necessarily taught these things. These are all part of the tools that we are picking up as we continue to do this work. So we pick some things up, we try them out, we see if they work. If they do, we keep them, we add them to the toolbox so we can use them when we need them. If they don't, we say, oh, that tool is not for me. Let me put that back down. That may be somebody else's tool. So, what we're watching, what we're listening to, what we're putting in our bodies, physically to nourish ourselves, what we are putting in our homes, and not just the overall home, but in our personal spaces, in our offices, in our bedrooms, in our bathrooms. These are all things that we must consider and figure out what works for us.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What works for us.
And not in an emergency case, but in a prepared and in advance case, right? That we're setting up spaces to meet our needs. Not that we get to this emergency space and we're depleted and it's like, oh my God, I need something. But that we have things set up in advance.
In an emergency. So working in schools, unfortunately, now we have to do these, active assailant drills on a regular basis. We just had one this week. We had to do a lockdown, and I was prepared because I read my little card that they gave me that said this is the lockdown procedure. So I had my paper, and my door was locked, and I was sitting at my desk on planning period. But I was prepared. I went to the training. I paid attention. So when it was time to go, I was ready. The worst time, the more you practice doing something, the easier it gets. The worst time to try to enact something that you've heard about or that you've seen is when you are in an emergency situation. Like, you probably don't have the clarity. So this is where a lot of our impulsive behaviors come in, right? Like, I just need to do something now to make myself feel good. And what did we talk about at the top of the conversation? What you do now quickly may not be the best thing for you overall. Mm-hmm. So this is why we do the work. This is why it is an ongoing practice. We talking about practice.
Practice.
without referencing that.
We are the inverse Allen Iversons. We believe in practice. We believe in practice.
You got to show up for practice. You got to practice every time like you're going to play. Because if you do not, then when it is time to play, you will not be prepared. Steph Curry is Steph Curry for that reason. Because he practiced. So when it's time for him to go into the game, he's ready. Because he'd already been doing that. I was having this conversation, and this will be my last thing. I'll close on this. I was having this conversation last night with the Chocolate Girl Wonder because she is a performance artist. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about you're not going to wake up one day and be an actress. You're not going to wake up one day and be a singer. You're not going to wake up one day and be a performance artist. You are a performance artist now. Everything that you are doing now, you are practicing and rehearsing in excellence for what it is that you want to achieve. You're not going to wake up one day and be great. You are always in the process of becoming great. Yes. That is the goal. So, like, you're not just going to wake up one day and have this all figured out. This is all part of a practice, an ongoing practice. Your healing requires you practicing self-care and self-love and self-respect and self-compassion. Practice.
Yeah. Absolutely. Practice. I mean, I can't think of a better note to leave off on. A regular practice of self-care can reduce the frequency of you feeling overwhelmed because you'll already be internally fortified. And when you face those things in the external world, they won't mean as much. They won't make as much of an impact. But should you become overwhelmed, you have a toolbox full of tools to then address that on a head to toe, internal and external self-centered, environmental-centered, 7 areas of wellness way. So that is what we're here for. That's why we have chat with the aunties. That's why we talk about these things, not only for ourselves and our wellness, but also to remind each other as well as to be of service to you. So, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully, this chat has been important and supportive of your healing. I will post a link to the Abraham Hicks Ask and It Is Given website, and you can get more information on that there. And just, keep coming back. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week, same time, same place. Well, actually, we'll start on time. We did have a little bit of technical difficulties this week, but we have been really working on that. So thank you for joining us. And as always, we appreciate it. And make sure that you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to Make You Media. And make sure that you share this on your social media pages if you enjoyed it. And leave us a couple of comments, okay? Thanks for joining us again for Chat with the Aunties. Bye, y'all. Bye. Mwah.